Have you ever wanted to learn a new language, but just didn't have the time or money? I may have a solution for you. Her name is Jessica, and she gives free Chinese lessons daily at 11 p.m. Beijing time and 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Chinese is fun and easy if you have the right teacher. Let Jessica be that teacher and introduce yourself to the fastest growing language in the international job market today at tinyurl.com/tcjessica and tell her Ian sent you.
Do you like fine art but think it might be out of your price range? Do you have a vision for a painting that you'd like to see brought to life but you just don't have the skill? I might have a solution for you. Art by Daisy. With decades of experience, Daisy offers high-quality, affordable watercolor paintings suitable for hanging in your home, office, or even as a gift, with prices starting at just $55. Visit tinyurl.com/artbydaisy to find out more.
Hello and welcome to the Deathcast. I'm your host, author, and journalist, Ian Totten. I'd like to thank you for joining me as we prepare to take our sixth look at the murders of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. Before we get into it, as always, I have the normal plugs. If you'd like to follow the show on social media, just search for the Deathcast, Deathcast Pod, or Deathcast Official. If you'd like to help support the show, there's a couple of ways you can do this. First and foremost, you can go to your favorite podcast app and leave a 5-star review. You can also go to buymeacoffee.com/thedeathcast and make a one-time donation. And lastly, you can go to tinyurl.com/dcastpatreon, where for as little as $2 a month, you can get access to early ad-free shows as well as access to exclusive content such as the Columbine case as well as Vince McMahon. Now that all of that is out of the way, find yourself a nice comfy chair, kick back, relax. I've got my coffee, I've got my cigarettes. Let's go into the crypt. When we left off last episode, O.J. Simpson had been taken into custody and booked on 2 counts of first-degree murder following a 60-mile-long police chase wherein his friend Al Cowlings slowly drove his Bronco while O.J. sat in the back seat with a gun to his head. Simpson spends the weekend sitting in a jail cell. Obviously, the news of Simpson's arrest is the only thing that is in the media during that weekend. On Monday morning, June 20th, Simpson is accompanied by his attorney, Robert Shapiro, and appears at his formal arraignment. An arraignment is where the charges are read to the defendant and they enter a plea of either guilty or not guilty. It was noted by the investigators that Simpson appeared to be a broken man, not the affable individual that they had interviewed the week prior. And at least according to interviews that the 2 main detectives gave after that, they initially thought that Simpson was going to try and cut a plea bargain. However, we know that is not, in fact, what happened. The municipal court judge who is overseeing the arraignment hearing orders Simpson be held without bond. What that means is that despite the fact that O.J. may be able to put the money up to get out of jail, they will not accept it because he's considered either a danger to the community or to himself, or a flight risk, or possibly both. Obviously, Simpson pleads not guilty at this arraignment hearing, and afterwards he goes back to his jail cell. On June 22nd, the district attorney's office officially releases the 911 call that Nicole had placed on October 25th, 1993, which I played in an earlier episode. In conjunction with all of this, there's a grand jury hearing
ongoing, where they are now looking at everything that has been gathered, interviewing witnesses to see if the state has a strong enough case to go forward with the charges against Simpson. The release of the 911 call, however, has an adverse effect on the prosecution, as a Superior Court supervising judge by the name of Cecil J. Mills calls an end to the grand jury, citing the release of this 911 call along with the mass amount of publicity that it has generated as the reason for ending the investigation, as he felt that it was interfering with Simpson's right to a fair trial. What this means is the prosecution is going to have to present their entire case to a judge prior to that judge making the decision as to whether or not the state has enough evidence to move forward with a trial. The grand jury hearings would have taken care of that, because after everything was presented and witnesses were interviewed, the judges sitting on the grand jury would then act as a jury and decide whether or not they believe that the state has enough evidence to possibly successfully prosecute Simpson. So there's no indictment to be handed up to a judge to oversee the trial. Instead, they have to deal with a preliminary hearing, which is, again, the prosecution presenting their case, and then that judge deciding, based on what is presented to him, whether he believes that the state has a possibility of successfully convicting Simpson on the evidence that is presented to him. Now, the dismissal of the grand jury was not the only setback to befall the prosecution during this period of time. In fact, during the initial stages of the grand jury investigation, a witness impeached herself on the stand. This was Jill Sibley, who, if you'll recall, had seen a white Ford Bronco run the red light at South Bundy and San Vicente on the night of the murders, and Miss Sibley was able to identify the driver of the vehicle as being an individual she believed to have been O.J. Simpson. How did she impeach herself? Well, Miss Sibley was asked during the grand jury on the 21st whether or not she had shared her story with anyone else other than law enforcement. Miss Shively replied that she had told her mother and a few of her friends. However, that night, Shively appeared on the television program Hard Copy, where she told of the entire encounter with the individual she believed to be O.J. Simpson. The way she impeached herself was, during this interview, she held up her grand jury subpoena, which she had received prior to going and actually speaking with the grand jury, meaning when she was on the stand and said she only talked to her mother and some friends, she lied to the grand jury. Furthermore, she made $5,000 from this interview. And this brings up a debate that has long ranged in the judicial circle between the courts and the media, namely the court's ability to prosecute an individual versus the public's right to know. We get this quite often nowadays. During this period of time, however, it wasn't as common for a witness to go and speak to the media. One of the reasons for this is it was much more difficult for the media to discover who these witnesses were.
And the reason why this is a problem is fairly simple. This individual has lied to the grand jury. The defense is going to be able to learn of this when the prosecution has to turn evidence over to the defense, including transcripts of the grand jury hearing. If Miss Shipley gets up on the stand and tells her story, they can then point to this and state, "You lied to the grand jury when you stated that you only spoke to your mother and some friends by appearing on hard copy prior to your grand jury testimony. How can we reasonably be expected to believe anything that you're saying?" Therefore, destroying any chance of credibility that this witness may have had with the jury, and making her a witness that the prosecution cannot now call. So after this appearance, the next day, Marcia Clark, who is questioning Shively, asks her about the deal with hard copy, and Shively admits to it. Another witness who is going to get tampered with in this fashion works for the knife company where Simpson is alleged to possibly have purchased the murder weapon, as the National Enquirer had given this individual and two other employees $12,500 for their story. This makes them unusable at the trial because, again, this is something that any defense attorney who's worth their salt can latch onto and attack the witness over. Meaning that they can go at them in the mindset of your financial gain is more important than the truth in this case. Ergo, how can we believe what you're saying? And again, this has plagued cases in the United States for decades and has only gotten worse in the years since. And it's the prosecution's duty to attempt to keep any of their witnesses under wraps and keep them from being spoken to by the media. And where this gets tricky is they can subpoena an individual and order them not to talk. However, that brings up questions of First Amendment rights, which is a very, very slippery slope. Other countries, such as Great Britain, where they do not have such lax freedoms on speech, judges can impose gag orders on everyone involved with and impose massive fines as well as prison sentences should anyone, witnesses included, break that gag order. Now, they can issue gag orders here in the United States. However, honestly, if somebody really wanted to fight it, there is a very good possibility because of the First Amendment that they would be able to get around that, and anything that is imposed upon them would get thrown out. So on June 30th, the preliminary hearing begins. And the hearing is actually broadcast live on national television on CNN and Court TV. As I've said throughout the series, this case was unlike anything that has ever come before or since, and this is a telltale mark of how things are going to proceed. Both CNN and Court TV record ratings for their coverage of the O.J. Simpson trial, and this is really the start of those record ratings. On July 1st, which is Friday, Robert Shapiro turns over to the prosecution taped interviews he has done with both Cato Kalin and Alan Park, who, if you'll recall, was the limousine driver who had gone to the North Rockingham estate on the night of June 12th to pick O.J. Simpson up. Now, according to both Kalin and Park,
They did not know during the time that they were being spoken to by Simpson's defense team that they were in fact being tape recorded, which is a violation of California law, as in the state of California and many other states, if you are recording someone, you have to, by law, inform them that this conversation is being recorded. It's why you see that so often in movies and television shows. On July 3rd, detectives returned to the South Bundy crime scene and notice that someone is videotaping them. They later learned that this is a former LAPD detective who is working for the defense team as a private investigator. Things are further complicated when it's realized that one of the defense witnesses who claims to have seen two individuals running from Nicole Brown Simpson's condo on the night of the murder is accompanying this private investigator. The detectives later learn that this particular witness has inserted himself into numerous cases over the years, including that of Polly Klaas and mafia boss Paul Castellano in New York City. On July 6th, Philip Van Adder is on the stand being questioned by Robert Shapiro over why he took the actions that he took at Simpson's estate on the early morning hours of June 13th, when Van Adder, Lang, Phillips, and Mark Furman all decided to enter the Simpson estate. Shapiro states that the officers violated Simpson's Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable search and seizure. While the officer gives numerous reasons as to why they entered Simpson's estate, specifically the belief that Simpson himself may have been a target in all of this, the defense team focuses in on the fact that Van Adder claimed to have needed his eyeglasses and a flashlight to see the speck on Simpson's driver's side door of the Bronco out in the street, which Van Adder suspected was blood. And the defense team pretty much plays around with Van Adder during this period of time, specifically because the prosecution has not entered into evidence that the Bronco had become an area of interest after Furman saw boxes in the back of the Bronco labeled Orenthal Productions. Quote Van Adder, "I think seeing the blood was the trigger that caused me to make the decision to go over the fence. I made a decision that we should go in there and check to see if everything was okay. We were within 5 minutes of a very, very brutal murder scene. I was concerned that this could be a second murder scene, whether someone was stalking Mr. Simpson and his wife. I really didn't know at that point what I had or what I was looking for." Obviously, Shapiro continues to hammer him, and Marcia Clark stands up for the detectives, basically stating that the reason they went over was they had to ensure that everyone inside the property was safe, and that they were not at a second murder scene, and that the idea of O.J. Simpson as a suspect had not yet come into their field of vision. Again, you're probably wondering why they're doing all of this. It's simply put, the prosecution really has to give their case to this judge in order for the judge to rule on whether or not they have enough evidence to charge Simpson in open court and proceed to trial. And I'll play a couple of snippets of you from this preliminary hearing to hear exactly what is going on.
Marcia Clark for the people. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning. All right, there are a number of matters on calendar today. I think one matter that can be resolved in fairly short order, and that relates to the hair sample, that the court did grant an order for a hair sample. The defense submitted an order to the court requesting to limit that hair sample to one hair. I did have my clerk contact the district attorney's office to determine whether they were in agreement with that order, and the indication was that they were not, and therefore I done nothing with regard to that order to this point. Ms. Clark, how much hair do the people need?
Well, Your Honor, hair samples, as I'm sure the defense must be aware, in order to be effectively compared with an evidence sample recovered from a crime scene, has to be taken from each area of the suspect's head. And that means that a minimum of 5 to 10 hairs from each area, which usually amounts to about 100 hairs. Any scientist, no matter how inexperienced, is aware of that fact. You cannot do an effective comparison between a known standard and an evidence standard without that size of sample.
So you're asking for 100 hairs?
We're asking for as many hairs as the criminalist or expert determines is necessary to effectively compare the standard hairs from the head of the defendant with the hairs found at the crime scene. And I've never seen a court attempt to restrict that, because that is obviously a matter that a criminalist would have to determine based on what he can recover.
Mr. Shapiro?
Your Honor, according to Dr. Henry Lee, our chief criminalist, who is the head of the Department of Criminology in Connecticut, he tells us 1 to 3 hairs are sufficient. I think perhaps this may be an appropriate matter for the court to have a hearing on. 100 hairs is unduly invasive. Makes the inventorying of the hairs a very, very difficult task, and certainly allows for the possibility of the commingling of samples, which could contaminate in testing. So we would ask for a hearing on this. I've been practicing for a long time. I have never, ever heard such a request.
Right. This is what I'm prepared to do at this point in time, and that is to order no more than 10 hairs at this point. If the prosecution at some point feels that they are in need of more hairs than the 10 that I'm going to allow at this point, then we will have that hearing with experts if necessary. This is not a matter that the court has independent expert knowledge concerning. So that's going to be the order at this point in time, subject to a further hearing with evidence, if necessary, from both sides for anything beyond 10 hairs.
As you can hear there, they're dickering over hair samples, and that's part of what this preliminary hearing is. It's the defense is trying to get as much evidence dismissed before trial as they possibly can as the prosecution presents their case to the court. When I say they're presenting their case, I don't mean they're bringing in every witness that they're going to present in a trial, should a trial take place. I mean they're presenting the evidence that they have, witness statements mostly from law enforcement personnel, that type of thing, in order to get the court to make a decision on whether or not they're going to allow this thing to go forward, while the defense is doing everything that they can to poke holes in the narrative that the prosecution is presenting. Now we're going to listen to the assistant director of the LADPD crime laboratory as she is cross-examined by Robert Shapiro.
Approximately square. This is all an approximation of these measurements.
Have any tests been conducted on that today?
No.
Do you anticipate any tests being conducted?
Yes.
When do you anticipate tests being conducted?
My answer on the testing would all be the same. If overall, maybe that would help.
I'd like to limit it just to this item.
Okay.
Because this has a different quantity than the first, does it not?
Well, yes, but your battery of tests proceed in the same manner. And the extract on all of them has to be done first, and it's the same extract that's used for both PCR and RFP. So,
if you have no strenuous objection, if you could address item number 4 as a separate item, I think that would be helpful for us.
that's fine. I'm just trying to make it less confusing for everyone.
Thank you.
Could you repeat where we are?
Do we call the question?
No, I did not.
Regarding item number 4, do you anticipate doing blood tests on this?
Yes.
What blood tests do you anticipate doing?
It appears to be enough to do, hopefully to do both PCR, some conventional serology, and possibly RFLP, which would consume the sample.
If you just did serology, would there be enough of a sample left for an independent laboratory to conduct a serology test?
Well, serology, to me, includes DNA. So serology, DNA, part of all of it. You're talking about conventional serology?
Here we're going to listen to the prosecution discuss various aspects of the case with the judge.
And asked to be able to approach because I don't want anything unfair, improper, or prejudicial to get into the record. I'm not sure what Mr. Shapiro is going to read, but we're dealing with a media source. One of the things that Ms. Clark and I have enjoyed thus far about this proceeding is the ability to present evidence in court in a lawyer-like fashion. So, Your Honor, if we may we approach so that we can discuss this in a more professional manner?
Please have the walkie-talkies off in court. Anything that we're going to talk about is going to be recorded. Are you asking for like a sidebar on this?
Yes.
All right. Then I'll see the lawyers in chambers first with the reporter, please.
Now, if you're interested in listening to and watching all of this, you can go to a YouTube channel called OJ Trial Uncut. Well, they have all of the court footage from the O.J. Simpson preliminary hearing as well as the actual trial from the live feed of the courthouse. A way I'm able to share this with you is that this live feed footage falls under fair usage as it is a matter of public record, meaning that anyone can have access to this, disseminate it to individuals, etc., etc. So after 6 days of this preliminary hearing on July 8th, the judge, Miss Kennedy Powell, rules that Simpson must stand trial. There is enough evidence to bring a case against him. The trial will take place in downtown Los Angeles. Obviously, Simpson and his defense team, which now includes F. Lee Bailey, who is a legendary defense attorney who at one point had defended Dr. Sam Shepard, who, if you're not aware, was the inspiration, supposedly, for the Fugitive television show, and, again, everything comes back to pro wrestling, was a professional wrestler after he was found not guilty. Patty Hearst, Alan Dershowitz, who is an infamous defense attorney, who is also very litigious, so I'm not going to even discuss anything having to do with him. And just after the preliminary hearing ends, Johnny Cochran joins the defense team. Now, Cochran is going to be the star of the defense team. He's a very charismatic individual, often noted for throwing out one-liners that enter the public discourse and really saying things that stick with the jury and the public's mind for decades afterwards. You're going to be hearing a lot from Johnny Cochran in the coming episodes. This group ends up becoming dubbed the Dream Team because they are all very successful, high-priced criminal defense attorneys known for being able to work magic inside of a courtroom, and honestly, they're going to work their wizardry in this case, as much as the prosecution is going to repeatedly shoot themselves in the foot. Now, originally, the prosecution was seeking at least 100 hairs from the head of O.J. Simpson, as you heard in one of the clips that I played. However, the defense was able to get that lowered, and eventually it was settled on 40 hairs, which were taken from Simpson on July 12th. According to Detective Lang, when they were getting the hairs from Simpson, Simpson stated to him, "I hope when you find something for me you don't throw it under the table," to which Lang claims he replied, "Count on it." Obviously, what Simpson was saying is that it was his hope that when they found something that exonerated him of the crime, the officers wouldn't bury it and continue with their prosecution against Simpson. On July 16th, friends of Nicole Brown Simpson are at the South Bundy home removing furniture when they notice a red stain on one of the bedposts in the children's room. They obviously contact police, and now police have to mobilize, go over, and gather this evidence. There's a bit of an argument between Officer Lang and Clark, as Lang states emphatically, look, they've gone through the entire house, there is no more blood evidence to discover, while Clark insists upon having this evidence gathered, and it eventually is. This ends up being nothing more than raspberry syrup. This information is again from the officers who investigated the case in their book Evidence Dismissed, the inside story of the People versus O.J. Simpson. At this point, cracks really started to appear between prosecutor Marcia Clark and the LAPD as her celebrity status, which had been bestowed upon her from the media, started to take its toll. You can see evidence of this in the pretrial hearing. Clark sounds very unsure of herself. Not at all what you would expect from a lead prosecutor. And it's simply put, this is one of those cases that will make or break a career, and obviously this one does end up breaking Clark's career because she crumbles under the pressure. And while that is my opinion, the evidence is there for all to see. At the formal arraignment hearing on July 22nd, Simpson is back to his old self, confident, self-assured. When asked how he pleads, he states absolutely 100% not guilty. Also on this date, Judge Lance Ito is assigned to the case. Not long after this, Deputy District Attorney Christopher Darden joins the prosecution team. Darden had come into this case because of A.C. Cowlings, who he's in the process of trying to prosecute. However, on July 29th, the charges against Cowlings in regards to his harboring of a fugitive are permanently postponed. Eventually, Cowlings will not face any form of criminal punishment, which, in my opinion, is right and just, as he did not intentionally harbor a fugitive. He was simply trying to help a friend. On the media side, the media is examining every single aspect of the lives of the individuals who are involved in this case. If you lived through the O.J. Simpson trial, you'll remember publishing of a topless photograph of Marcia Clark from when she was younger and was with her first husband, along with discussions of the child custody battle she was having with her previous husband, discussing of her hairstyle during the trial, along with long and lengthy discussions of the outfit she wore to court. This didn't stop with just Marcia Clark, however. They also focused in on Officers Lang and Van Adder, Judge Ito, Christopher Darden. Every part of this case from the state side, the media went into a frenzy over, disseminating any bit of information that they could in regards to the key players. And really, this was a first in the country, at least that I'm aware of, to have such over-the-top coverage of a case. Really, the only comparable case that I can think of were the trials of Charles Manson and his followers. And even then, the media did not go to such great lengths to dig into the backgrounds of all of the key players. as that case was wild enough that they didn't need to expose every little dirty secret in the prosecution's case, as Manson and his followers made such waves every single day that anything outside of that was really secondary. Things get to a point that Marcia Clark is eventually given a around-the-clock protection team, as it's feared that some crackpot might try and do something to her. While he is sitting in jail, O.J. Simpson offers a $500,000 reward for information that will lead to the real killers. And I've heard it said that it was at this moment that the prosecution and the officers involved realized that O.J. Simpson was not going to be seeking any form of a plea bargain and was in fact going to fight for his freedom come hell or high water. While all of this is going on in July of 1994, a writer for The New Yorker by the name of Jeffrey Tobin publishes an article in which he states that an unknown source close to the defense team has revealed to him that Detective Mark Furman is going to be central to the defense's strategy, as they are going to claim that everything Furman did on the night of June 12th and the early morning hours of June 13th boils down to Mark Furman being a racist. Again, according to this article, Tobin claims to have gotten access to Furman's personnel file, specifically a psychological profile that was done on Furman in the wake of him requesting a pension from the LAPD in the early 1980s due to stress, a request which was denied. Further, the article states that the defense team is going to claim that Furman planted evidence at the North Rockingham estate, including but not limited to the discovery of the right-hand glove in the alley behind the bungalows, along with the blood evidence that was found. And part of the basis for this strategy comes from testimony that Furman had given during the preliminary hearing when describing the glove found at the South Bundy crime scene. Furman had referred to the glove as them as opposed to it, which is going to allow the defense to get in there and attempt to create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors as to whether or not there were in fact two gloves found at the Bundy crime scene, and whether or not Furman took one of those gloves with him to the Rockingham estate, which he then planted. In response to this, Mark Furman's personal attorney, who he has retained after the preliminary hearing, issues a statement that reads, quote, "The only people calling Mark Furman a racist are the attorneys for the defense. We're going to fight back. By the end of the trial, the entire world will know that Mark Furman is not a racist." While a spokesman for the Los Angeles Police Department released a statement that reads, "Furman enjoys the full respect, support, and admiration of the Chief of Police and the LAPD's management staff." With all of this happening, officers begin to push the district attorney's office to get the judge to issue a gag order, which I talked about earlier in this episode. However, when told of this, Clark responds that the biggest problem that they are facing are leaks within the LAPD who are talking to the media. Specifically, Clark claims that there are probably leaks in the crime lab. What this boils down to is that the DA's office is not going to request a gag order, something that is going to bite them in the ass quite heavily during the criminal trial. And again, according to Lang, During this period of time, he could see that the prosecution team was very hungry and ambitious and saw this case as a springboard to not only make their careers, but make them into something of media celebrities. And that is a very dangerous situation for the prosecution to be in, because they are not thinking clearly and they're not listening to those who are in the case that are trying to protect what they're building against the accused. Again, according to Lang, he realizes at this point in July of 1994 that the prosecution isn't so much worried about supposed leaks as they are the fact that a gag order would stop the prosecution team from speaking with the media. Perhaps realizing the predicament that the prosecution has placed them in, on Friday, September 23rd, the LAPD Chief of Police, Willie Williams, issues an internal departmental memorandum which all officers are required to sign, wherein they state that they will not talk or discuss the case with anyone, including but not limited to the media. While all of this is going on, the Los Angeles Police Department is continuing its investigation of the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. We're going to backtrack a little bit to talk about the things that don't involve the media aspect, the prosecution maneuvers, and the defense maneuvers, to look at evidence that was collected during this period of time after Simpson has been arrested, the grand jury is dismissed, etc., etc. On June 21st, 1994, an interview was conducted with Nicole Brown Simpson's neighbor, Robert Hydra, where he stated, quote, Mr. Hydra stated that he walks his two dogs on a nightly basis at approximately 2,200 hours. His route of travel always consists of the same streets, although the direction he takes varies. On the night in question, Sunday evening, June 12, 1994, he left his apartment with his dogs at about 22:15 hours. He walked east on Dorothy to Westgate, then north on Westgate to Gorham. He turned left on Gorham and walked west to Bundy Drive. He turned left on Bundy and began walking south. He indicates that Bundy Drive has a large curve in the roadway at that location. Because of that curve, he was unable to see the front of Brown's home. Mr. Hydra stated he walks the same route every day and is familiar with the dogs in the various residences as well as the exterior of the various residences themselves. Shortly after turning south on Bundy Drive, Mr. Hydra heard the sound of the Akita dog owned by Nicole Brown to bark furiously. The barking was non-stop and the dog appeared agitated. Mr. Hydra is familiar with the sound of the bark of the Akita as it barks frequently whenever Mr. Hydra passes the location with his two dogs. Believing the dog might possibly be loose and a danger to him and his dogs, Mr. Hydra changed his route of travel and turned in an adjacent alley which paralleled Bundy Drive and which would take him back to Dorothy Street. As he reached the alley, he heard a male voice loudly cry, "Hey, hey, hey," and then a sound of a large metal gate closing. It was his opinion the sound came from the Brown home, as that residence is the only one in the area with a large metal security gate. He then heard the sounds of two men loudly arguing, but he was unable to discern what they were saying specifically. All the while, the Akita continued to bark non-stop, and in fact continued to bark until about 2,300 hours. As Mr. Hydra reached Dorothy Street, he looked west and observed a large white vehicle which he indicated was shaped similar to his own Chevy Blazer on Dorothy Street at the intersection of Bundy Drive. The white vehicle turned right south on Bundy and drove from the location at a high rate of speed. Now we have another witness placing what we today would term an SUV in the area of Nicole Brown Simpson's house around the time the murders are believed to have taken place. On June 22nd, Officer Lang interviews Lou and Judith Brown at their residence in Dana Point. Also present during this interview are Nicole's sisters Denise and Dominique. This is a long 3-hour interview during which the sisters repeatedly state that they know O.J. Simpson killed their sister, while the parents are reticent to point their fingers at O.J. Simpson. According to notes that Lang took of this interview, quote, "While they appear to be happy when they were out together, it was the opposite when they were alone. O.J. was very jealous of Nicole. Denise Brown stated that Nicole tried to make it work with O.J., but confided to her sisters that he drains me. He has nothing to say, but he calls all the time." According to Judith Brown, Simpson stated to her months prior to the murder, quote, "The only woman I want in my life and I can't have is your daughter," before later stating that her daughter had informed her that Simpson had said, quote, "If I ever see you with another man, I'll kill you." Again, according to Judith, Nicole had stated, quote, "He's following me again, Mommy. I'm scared. I go to the gas station and he's there. I go to the Payless shoe store and he's there. I'm driving and he's behind me." Denise Simpson also stated that roughly 2 weeks before the murders, Nicole had confided in her sister that the threats from Simpsons had continued, that she wished she had a tape recorder so that she could get all of this on the record, and that Simpson had informed her after their most recent breakup that he had quote unquote no reason to live now. They then go on to recount the events of the 12th, including being introduced to Ronald Goldman, who Nicole states was quote-unquote my friend. And just before the conclusion of the interview, Judith Brown reveals a bombshell revelation that roughly 2 weeks before the murders had taken place, Nicole had informed her mother that an extra set of keys for the condo were now missing, and that she believed that Simpson had these keys, which fit both the front and back doors of the home. With this information in their possession, the detectives start to look at what was found in A.C. Cowling's Bronco on the night that O.J. Simpson was arrested, and to no one's surprise, a set of keys was discovered. The detectives end up facing a bit of a dilemma, as Nicole Brown's father, Lou, had changed out the locks on the condominium at his daughter's request. This was after the keys did not reappear, and she became fearful that, in fact, Simpson may have this set of keys. Now, it's an interesting chain of events that led to the locks being changed. Nicole's friend Faye Resnick, who was a noted cocaine user, had had an intervention, and because of this intervention, Resnick ends up staying with Nicole for a short period of time. During this period of time, Nicole goes through all of Resnick's personal belongings looking for the keys and is unable to find them, and as a consequence, she contacts her father to come and change the locks, believing that Simpson has these keys. Learning all of this, the detectives reach out to various individuals who knew Nicole to see if anyone has a spare key to the home, and lo and behold, they discover that one of Nicole's friends did in fact possess a key to the house. With this key, they are able to have a lock constructed that the key will work in, and after this lock is constructed, they test both the key that Nicole's friend had as well as the keys that were found inside of Cowling's Bronco to discover, to no one's surprise, that both keys work inside of this lock. Given what we know of the relationship between Simpson and Brown, and the fact that even though they had tried to reconcile numerous times, it was according to Simpson, officially over, there is no reason for Simpson to have had access to keys that opened the doors at Nicole Brown's home. Also interviewed during this period of time is a limousine driver who had chauffeured Simpson around on Thursday, June 9th. Simpson had been out in Connecticut at a board of directors meeting of the Forstner Group, which is the company that makes Swiss Army knives and watches. And at this board of directors meeting, Simpson was given a number of watches as well as knives, which he in turn showed to this chauffeur, who stated that the 3 of the knives were between 12 and 16 inches long when fully extended. Simpson is supposed to have offered the driver one of these knives, which the driver refused to take. Again, according to this driver, as they left the manufacturing warehouse where the knives were made, Simpson pulled one of the knives out and extended it and started swinging around in the back seat, playfully stating, quote, "This could hurt someone really bad. It could kill someone. It's real sharp." After this, the driver agrees to take a polygraph examination, which he passes. On June 28th, 1994, the LAPD, headed by Van Adder, conducts a second search of Simpson's North Rockingham home. They are looking for numerous items, including a dark blue sweatsuit Simpson had possibly worn on the night of the murders, along with the actual murder weapon. Neither of these items are found. However, numerous items of interest are discovered, including a script, a call sheet, and a videotape for a TV pilot Simpson had done called Frogman, wherein Simpson plays a Navy SEAL. Now, Simpson's business office is searched twice on August 12th and September 2nd. During the first search of the offices, the officers had discovered a 3-page document that covered Simpson's physical abuse of Nicole Brown. They attempted to seize it and were stopped by Simpson's attorneys and a court-appointed master who had been sent there by the court to oversee the search. Obviously, when the detectives returned to get the piece of evidence on September 2nd, they learn that it had in fact been destroyed in the interim. This is almost certainly at the direction of either Simpson or those individuals that he had overseeing his business while he was incarcerated. On August 26th, Officer Lang is present when the SID team conducts further testing on Simpson's Bronco using the substance luminol. For those who don't know what luminol is, it's basically something that is sprayed on that attaches to blood particles, and when a black light is shown over it, reveals these otherwise unseen blood stains. Doing this, they discover more blood stains inside the front of the Bronco, which are then quickly collected. During this search, a small light bulb is found on the passenger side floor. Further investigation reveals that the interior light's cover is missing and that the light bulb is gone. Believing that this light bulb may in fact be the one that goes inside of the overhead light, the bulb is preserved for fingerprint analysis. It's later learned that this bulb, while having no fingerprints, does in fact work and fits the interior light of the Bronco. And according to Lang, at this point with this information, he begins to hypothesize that after committing the murders, Simpson had gotten inside of the car, which was dark inside because the bulb was missing, and attempted to locate the light bulb underneath the passenger seat so that he could put it back in, which explained the strange areas that blood had been discovered inside of the Bronco on the passenger seat. And being unable to find the bulb, Simpson had simply decided he didn't have time to deal with it at that moment and continued on with his escape. My point of view on it is this: if we assume that Simpson committed the murders, it's very possible that he attempted to locate the light bulb after he returned to the Rockingham estate so that he could see inside of the car to see if he had left any incriminating evidence, including blood or things of that nature. And upon being unable to find this light bulb and seeing that the driver was at the other gate to the Rockingham estate, had simply forgotten about it, gotten out of the car, and then went on with returning to the interior of his property. On August 27th, the defense team is given a tour of the South Bundy crime scene. According to the detectives present, none of the members of the defense team who were present really had any sort of preparation in terms of bringing things with them to the crime scene in order to try and line things up. In fact, one of the detectives would later state that one member of the defense team actually thought that the bodies had been found up on the landing at the front door of Nicole Brown's home, while another member of the defense team was under the impression that Mark Furman had discovered the bodies while looking through a window inside of Nicole Brown's home, which is another theory that some individuals have, that Furman may in fact have been having an affair with Nicole Brown. After this walkthrough, the detectives discover, much to their chagrin, that defense attorney Johnny Cochran is out in the street in front of the South Bundy crime scene holding a press conference, and that in fact this entire charade of a walkthrough is nothing more than a publicity stunt by the defense team to show that they are really working on Simpson's defense. Now, on September 9th, the district attorney's office announces that they will not be seeking the death penalty in the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. On September 11th, members of the LAPD, along with individuals from the DA's office, travel to Chicago, where they conduct interviews with individuals who had interacted with Simpson during his brief stay there on the morning and afternoon of June 13th. A tour is conducted of the room that Simpson stayed at the hotel, where the detectives find out that the glasses that are in the hotel with Simpson has claimed to have accidentally broken, which caused the cut on his hand, are extremely thick and can take considerable amount of force to break them. They also learned that blood was found on a washcloth as well as on the bedding in the bed that Simpson slept in. They interview the desk clerk who was on duty after Simpson learned of his wife's death, and discover that Simpson had created a scene down in the lobby when he demanded that the clerk find a bandage for his hand. They also learn that a Hertz employee who had driven Simpson back to the airport when he returned to Los Angeles had found Simpson sitting on the curb with his travel bag beside him open, and that the employee was stunned to notice how empty the travel bag was. This Hertz employee also states that while Simpson was visibly upset, he did not, in fact, explain why he was upset. The prosecution has also gotten back much of the evidence that was seized for testing, which showed that Simpson's blood was found at the crime scene, but also that the blood of the victims were found inside of Simpson's Bronco. They also received word from the FBI that the bloody shoe prints that had been discovered came from a very specific type of shoe, an expensive and rather rare type called Bruno Magli. Now, trying to establish that Simpson had in fact owned a specific pair of these shoes, officers meet with one of Nicole's sisters, showing her various pictures of the shoes that Magli makes. And without hesitation, this sister points to a very specific low-cut pair of shoes, stating that she had seen Simpson wearing them around Easter of 1994. Now, this is important because this specific shoe that this sister points out is in fact the one that is believed to have made the bloody footprints over at the South Bundy crime scene. The sister also points out that Nicole had also owned a pair of shoes by this company, and that she is in fact wearing Nicole's shoes right then and there. Before ending with, Nicole bought these shoes in New York along with the shoes that Simpson had owned. The detectives also find film footage of Simpson from 1991 where he was providing color analysis on a football game for the NFL, where it appears that Simpson is wearing the same pair of gloves that had been discovered at both crime scenes. This is significant as officers had been unable to find the gloves that Simpson was wearing during that broadcast, just as they were unable to find the Bruno Magli shoes that Nicole's sister stated he had worn. With the gloves, they discovered that that particular brand had been sold through Bloomingdale's in New York, and that only a few pairs of them had actually sold. Officers are able to trace back using credit card receipts and find that Nicole had visited New York in 1991 and had purchased these gloves, in fact 2 pairs, on December 18th, 1990. And individuals for both the glove company Bloomingdale's and the shoe company are in fact going to become prosecution witnesses. And they learn from an individual who works for the company that not only were a few of these gloves sold, but that the gloves found at both crime scenes are the exact same ones that Nicole had purchased during her trip to New York. We're going to end the episode at this point. I hope that you have enjoyed our 6th look at the deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, as well as the media firestorm concerning O.J. Simpson's prosecution as a result of these deaths. Until next time, the Deathcast is a production of Corpse Creek Publishing in association with Big Pond Podcasts. Stay morbid.